The war between humans and the alien race called the Nayari had gone on for many years. Planets burned, ships broke in the sky like glass, cities became empty. Both sides had lost too much. But on the burned moon of Keres 7, everything was about to end. The human army had pushed the Nayari back to their last stronghold. It was a massive black fortress built into a mountain. Inside, the last group of Nayari leaders waited. They had no more ships, no more soldiers. Only fear and silence remained. Terran stood on the dusty hill, looking down at the broken battlefield. He was not a general. He was a soldier, simple and quiet. He had fought in more than 50 battles. His armor was full of scratches. His hands were rough. His face looked tired, but his eyes were sharp like steel. When the signal came, Terran led the charge. He did not shout or raise his weapon high. He simply moved forward, and others followed. The final battle was short. The Nayari surrendered. The war was over. After the victory, all the soldiers gathered. The leaders of the human side began to give rewards to those who had fought bravely. Some received medals, some were given land, others were promised power or a high place in the new world. Then it was Terran's turn. The commanders asked him what he wanted as a reward. They were ready to offer him anything: riches, honor, even a ship of his own. But Terran surprised everyone. "I want one of the prisoners," he said, in a calm voice. The commanders looked at each other. One of them asked, "Which one?" Terran pointed to a group of Nayari prisoners sitting under guard. "Her," he said. They looked at the alien woman he had chosen. She was small, thin, and weak. Her skin was pale green. Her eyes were half closed. She looked too tired to stand. She wore no armor, no rank marks, and had not spoken a word since her capture. The commander frowned. "She is nothing special," he said. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Terran replied. The commanders did not argue. The war was over. If Terran wanted a weak alien woman as a reward, they would not stop him. The woman was brought forward. Her legs shook as she walked. She did not look at anyone. She did not speak. Some soldiers laughed. Others whispered that Terran had lost his mind, but Terran stayed. "Quiet!" He took the woman without saying anything else and left the battlefield. He did not choose riches or glory. He chose a silent, broken alien woman. Nobody knew why. They traveled to a quiet planet on the edge of the human zone. It was a green world, full of trees and clean water. There was no war there. Only Peace. Terran lived in a small shelter near the forest. He fixed broken tools, grew simple food, and helped the people nearby. He gave the woman a room, warm food, and a safe place to rest. He never locked her door. He never shouted. He never asked who she was. She did not speak. She moved slowly, always careful. She helped with small things. She washed tools, cleaned the floor, and watched the stars at night. The people in the village called her strange. They asked Terran why he had brought her. He only said, "She needs peace." Over time, the woman began to change. She started to walk with more strength. She listened to the wind, the water, and the machines. She still did not talk, but her eyes were open now. They watched everything. Terran watched her too, but not with fear or anger. He watched with quiet respect. What nobody knew was that Terran had seen her before. Not on the battlefield, not as a prisoner, but years ago, during a secret mission, he had seen a face on a Nayari screen. The face belonged to a powerful mind inside the enemy council. They called her the Thinker. She was not a fighter. She was a planner, a builder. Her ideas had helped the Nayari survive long in the war. That face was the same as the one he saw among the captured prisoners. She had changed herself, removed all signs of rank, damaged her own voice system, made herself look weak and helpless, but her eyes had not changed. Terran had not said anything. He did not report her. He had made his choice the moment he saw her sitting among the others. He did not take her as a prize. He had rescued her because he believed she had something more to give, not to the war, but to the future. Tarin lived far away from noise and war. His small home was built with his own hands. It stood near the edge of a quiet forest, where the wind moved through tall trees and birds sang gently in the morning. The alien woman, Leary, stayed in the room he gave her. It was small, clean, and full of light from a window that opened toward the hills. She spent most of her time sitting near the window, watching the sky. She still had not spoken a word. Her steps were soft. Her eyes always moved, always searching. She seemed afraid to touch anything without care. Even when she picked up a cup or moved a chair, she did it slowly, as if everything around her might break. Taryn noticed these small things, but he never asked questions. He gave her food 3 times a day, simple meals, warm soup, bread and fruit from his garden. She ate without rush. Sometimes she looked at him as if she wanted to say something, but her lips never moved. Taryn did not mind. He had seen too much war. He had heard enough shouting and commands to last a lifetime. Silence was not a problem for him. He found it peaceful during the day. He worked with machines, broken drones, small generators, and farming tools. He fixed everything. He also helped villagers nearby when their water filters or power lines stopped working. They respected him but didn't visit often. They called him a quiet man who had earned his rest. Leary started helping in small ways. She cleaned tools and placed them in perfect order. She swept the floor without being asked. She folded blankets with sharp lines. Everything she touched became neat and balanced. Taryn began to see patterns in her movements. She didn't act like someone lost or broken. She moved with care, like someone trained to observe and understand. She watched the machines he worked on. Her eyes followed every wire and every spark of energy. She never touched anything without first studying it at night. Taryn sat outside by the fire. Leary sometimes joined him. They sat without speaking. She stared at the stars. He stared at the flames. In the silence between them, something unspoken began to grow. One evening, while fixing a damaged drone, Taryn dropped a tool. Before he could reach for it, Leary picked it up and handed it to him without looking. Her eyes were still on the open drone. Her finger pointed at a loose wire. Taryn followed her gesture. She was right. The drone's core line had a weak point. He looked at her. She gave a small nod and stepped back. That night, he stayed awake longer than usual. He knew now for sure that she understood machines. Not in a simple way, but deeply. She had not guessed about that wire. She had seen it the moment the drone opened. She had not spoken a single word, but she had just spoken to him in another way. Taryn's mind went back to the war again. He remembered how Nayari ships always seemed to be one step ahead. How their defense walls always had exact timings. How their city maps showed perfect use of space and energy. Someone had planned all that. Not a general. A mind. He had heard about her. The thinker. The one who never stood in front of an army but controlled everything behind it. Some said she had shaped the Nayari war strategy from the start. And now, she was folding blankets in his house. He didn't say anything the next day. He simply placed another broken drone on the table and left the room. When he came back, she had opened it already. One part was placed aside. The wire layout had been corrected. She stood near the window, silent. They did this for days. He brought machines. She fixed parts. No words passed between them. But trust started to build, piece by piece. One morning, Taryn found her in the garden. She was holding a small, damaged weather scanner. It belonged to one of the villagers. Without asking, she had fixed it. The screen now showed the wind direction again. Taryn smiled. "Thank you," he said. Leary turned. Her eyes met his for a moment. Then she gave a small nod and walked back inside. Later that week, a group of soldiers came to visit the village. They were from the human command. They checked for hidden threats, old weapons, or spies. One of them saw Leary walking near the forest. "Who is that?" the soldier asked. Taryn stepped forward. "She is with me," he said. "Is she safe?" The man asked again. "She is quiet," Taryn replied. "That's all." The soldier looked, unsure, but he didn't argue. They left before sunset. That night, Leary looked tense. She stood near the door as if ready to run. Taryn placed a hand on the table. Slowly, he pushed a data pad toward her. On it, he had written one line, "You are safe here." She read it, then looked at him. Her lips trembled. She didn't speak, but her hands relaxed. The stars were bright that night. Taryn sat by the fire again. This time, Leary brought 2 cups of warm tea and placed one beside him. They sat together. No words. Only the soft sound of wind in the trees. Something was changing. Taryn knew she was more than a weak alien woman, and Leary knew this soldier was not just a simple man. Taryn sat at his workbench with a damaged solar chip in his hand. Outside, birds called across the trees and soft light came through the open window. Leary was in the corner, sorting through a box of old tools. She worked in silence, her hands steady and sure. Each day, her movements had grown stronger. Her steps were firmer, her eyes brighter. She still hadn't spoken, but she no longer looked like someone weak or broken. She moved with purpose. Taryn had been watching, not just with his eyes, but with his mind. Every time she picked up a tool, adjusted a circuit, or solved a problem he hadn't seen, he was reminded of something from his past. It was during his 4th year in the war, long before the final battle. He had been part of a mission to recover stolen data from an abandoned Nayari outpost. His team had entered a deep underground hall. The walls were covered with strange symbols and glowing screens. One screen had shown the image of a female Nayari, her face calm and her eyes sharp. She was giving instructions in a soft voice to a group of Nayari leaders. That woman was not just any figure. She was called the Thinker. Not a fighter, not a commander, but something even more powerful. She was the one who designed the Nayari's defense system, ship patterns, and war strategy. She had built the logic behind every move the Nayari made in the long war. Taryn had never forgotten that face. He had stared at it longer than the others. He saw intelligence, calm strength, and something else. Something deeper. Now, in his quiet home far from the war, he was sure that same face was standing in his living room, placing tools in perfect rows and fixing broken devices with ease. She had changed herself. Her voice was gone, perhaps damaged on purpose. Her body was weaker now, likely after deep stress or starvation. Her clothes were plain, but her eyes, they had not changed. He remembered how she had looked when he first saw her among the prisoners. She had tried to hide. She had lowered her head and looked away from everyone. But Taryn had seen her. He had recognized her immediately. He didn't take her because he wanted power over her. He had taken her because he believed she had more to offer, not for war, but for something new, something peaceful. Taryn stood up and walked to the cabinet. He opened a hidden drawer and took out a small metal cube. He placed it on the table between them. It hummed gently and lit up with a blue glow. Leary paused. Her hands froze for a moment. She looked at the cube, then at him. Taryn pressed one side of the cube. A small hologram appeared. It showed the same image from the Nayari outpost years ago. The woman giving orders. The Thinker. Her face was clear. Calm. Sharp. He turned the cube toward her. "You remember this?" he asked. Leary looked at the image. For a moment, her body became very still. She did not blink. Then, slowly, she gave one small nod. Taryn sat back. "I knew it was you," he said. "From the start." Leary looked down. Her hand rested on the table. Her fingers curled slightly, as if she didn't know what to do next. "I don't know why you stopped fighting," Taryn said. "I don't know how you escaped, but I know you're not weak. I know you were the mind behind everything." Leary looked up. Her eyes were calm, but there was something in them, a kind of sadness mixed with understanding. Taryn leaned forward. "I didn't bring you here to control you," he said. "I brought you here because I believe you're not done. Yet. Not with war, but with something better." Leary stood in silence. Then, for the first time, she reached for the cube and turned it off. Her fingers were gentle. She placed the cube back in the drawer and closed it carefully. She walked to the table, took a small data pad and started drawing on it. Lines, circles, shapes. She worked fast. Her hands moved with confidence. Taryn leaned closer. He saw what she was drawing. It was not a machine or a weapon. It was a map, a system of stars. At the center was a symbol he didn't recognize. She handed it to him and pointed at one of the planets on the map. "You want to go there?" he asked. She nodded. "Why?" he asked again. Leary walked to the shelf and picked up a small model of an old satellite. She placed it next to the map and tapped it twice. Then she pointed at the planet again. Taryn understood. There was something there. Something important. A device, a tool. Something hidden before the war ended. "You know what it is?" he asked. She didn't nod. Instead, she raised one finger and pointed to both of them. Then she pointed to the map again. Taryn sat in silence. His heart beat faster. She had not spoken a single word, but she had just told him everything he needed to know. There was something left behind. Something powerful. Maybe dangerous. Maybe helpful, and she wanted to find it. With him that night, Taryn stood outside, looking up at the stars. Leary sat beside him. For the first time, she reached out and placed a small chip in his hand. It was Nayari made, smooth, silver, and old. He didn't know what it held, but he trusted her. Taryn knew one thing for sure. The weakest alien woman was not weak at all, and the journey ahead had just begun. The morning sun rose over the green hills. A soft wind moved through the tall grass. Birds flew across the sky in slow circles. Taryn sat on the edge of the wooden steps, holding the small Nayari chip in his hand. He had kept it safe all night. He had not opened it yet. Behind him, Leary stood near the table, adjusting the data pad. Her hands moved quickly but calmly. She had drawn the star map again. She had marked a single planet with a dark circle. That was the place she wanted to reach. Taryn turned the chip in his hand. It looked plain. No marks, no lights, just a smooth silver surface. But something inside it was more than metal or data. It held part of her past. Maybe even a key to something the war had left buried. He placed the chip into the reader and connected it to the pad. The screen lit up with a low pulse. Strange symbols appeared. They were Nayari code, not used in common systems. Taryn looked at Leary. She nodded once. He watched the symbols scroll across the screen. At first, it looked like a broken list. Then, shapes started to form. A structure, not a weapon, not a map of soldiers. Something else. It was a design, a machine. No, more than that. A living system made from energy, light, and matter. Taryn could not understand all of it, but he understood the result. This device had the power to either heal a dying planet or burn it from the inside. It was made by the Nayari long before the war began. It had been hidden away, a secret even, from most of their own leaders. Leary stepped forward and placed her hand over part of the design. Her finger pointed to one word written in her native script. Taryn translated it slowly, the future path. He looked at her. She did not smile or speak, but there was something calm in her eyes, a kind of hope. Taryn stood up. "If it's real," he said, "we need to reach it before anyone else does." Leary nodded again. She walked to the corner and pulled a small bag from a locked box. Inside were pieces of an old navigation module, part of a ship's memory core, and a set of coordinates. Taryn opened the star map again and placed the coordinates in the system. The planet was deep in an old zone, far from any human or Nayari base. The area had been closed during the war. Most believed it was dead space, filled with wreckage and radiation. "We'll need a ship," Taryn said. They did not own one, but they knew someone who did. An old trader lived 2 valleys away. He had a cargo ship, slow but strong. Taryn had helped him once with a broken power unit. Maybe he would help again. They left that evening. The path was quiet. The wind followed them through the trees. Leary walked beside him, her steps light but firm. She no longer looked weak. She moved like someone with a goal. When they reached the trader's home, he was sitting near a fire. He looked up. "Surprised to see them, Taryn," he said. "You've come a long way." "And she's still with you," Taryn nodded. "I need a ship," he said. The trader raised an eyebrow. "Going somewhere important?" "Yes," Taryn said. "Far. Quiet zone. No questions asked." The trader leaned back and thought, for a while. Then he stood up and waved them toward the storage dock. "Take the silent wing. She's old, but she'll get you through. Just don't break her." Taryn placed his hand on the trader's shoulder. "Thank you." They spent the next day preparing. Leary worked on the controls, tuning the systems with careful hands. Taryn loaded supplies, fuel cells, food, and medical packs. By sunset, the ship was ready. Inside the silent wing, the air was cold and still. The lights flickered at first, then held steady. The engine hummed as Leary started the launch sequence. The ship rose slowly and then moved into the sky stars, opened around them like small fires in the dark. Taryn sat in the pilot seat. Leary took the navigator's chair. She entered the path manually, checking every gate and signal. They flew for 2 days without trouble. Then they reached the edge of the dead zone here. Space looked different. Empty, cold, no signals, no lights. Just floating pieces of old ships and broken satellites. They moved carefully. Leary scanned everything. She pointed to one direction. Taryn followed without question. Suddenly a warning flashed on the screen. Another ship had appeared in the far distance. Small, fast, not human, not Nayari. A shadow ship, the kind used by pirates or old loyalists from the war. "We're not alone," Taryn said. Leary moved to the control board and sent a signal burst. The other ship responded with silence. Then it turned slowly toward them. Taryn switched the silent wing to low energy mode. They drifted between metal wreckage, using the shadows to hide. The other ship passed by, searching. After 20 minutes, it vanished into the dark. Leary looked at Taryn. He gave a short nod. "You saved us again," he said. They moved forward. After another few hours, the planet appeared. It was covered in thick clouds and strange light. Its surface looked untouched. Wild forests, mountains, blue water that shimmered even from orbit. Leary leaned forward. Her eyes did not blink. She pointed to one point on the surface, a valley between 2 high cliffs. "That's it," Taryn said. They guided the ship down through the clouds. The landing was soft. The air outside was clean and full of scent from unknown flowers. Strange birds flew in the sky. No signs of war. No broken buildings. They stepped out of the ship and stood on the soft grass. Leary walked ahead without fear. Taryn followed, his hand resting on his side tool. The valley ahead glowed with a soft blue light. Something waited there, a secret from the past, a gift, or a curse. They were about to find out. Taryn and Leary stood at the edge of the valley. The grass beneath their boots was soft and damp. Strange flowers opened slowly in the morning light. Birds with wide wings flew overhead. The planet was quiet, untouched by war or machines. Leary walked. Ahead, her steps calm and steady. She seemed to know exactly where to go. Her eyes moved from the cliffs to the trees, searching for markers only she understood. Taryn followed close behind, scanning the area for danger. His hand stayed near his side tool, just in case. They moved through thick vines and tall ferns. The path was not easy, but Leary never stopped. Her body, once weak and slow, now moved with purpose. She didn't speak, but her actions said everything. She had been here before, or maybe she had studied this place long ago. After a long climb, they reached a flat area between two high walls of stone. In the center stood a tower. It was made of black and silver rock, covered in strange symbols. Some glowed faintly as they stepped closer. The door was wide, like an arch, but there was no handle or panel. Leary stepped forward. She touched a small symbol near the bottom of the door. A light passed through the wall. The stone opened slowly. With a soft sound and cool air flowed out, they entered together. Inside, the tower was quiet. The floor was smooth. The walls were filled with curved lines and moving lights. At the center stood a large object. It was round, almost like a heart, made of glass and metal. Soft blue light pulsed from within. Taryn stepped closer. The light grew brighter. It was not hot, not cold. It felt alive. He looked at Leary. She reached into her bag and pulled out the silver chip from before. She placed it in a small slot on the side of the device. The blue light blinked twice, then began to swirl. Images appeared in the air above them. Planets, stars, cities, forests, fields. Some were broken and dry. Others were green and full of life. Then came diagrams, energy lines, growth patterns, healing systems. Taryn understood. This was not a weapon. It was a builder, a restorer, a system designed to fix what had been damaged. It could bring balance back to dying worlds. It could clean air, heal soil, and rebuild ecosystems. But it also had another side. Leary showed him a second set of symbols. These lines moved fast and sharp. The energy pulsed harder. Red warnings flashed. If used without control, the same power could destroy instead of heal. Taryn stepped back and took a deep breath. "Why, was this hidden?" he asked quietly. Leary tapped the symbol for silence, then pointed to the stars above. She drew a circle in the air and placed her hand on her heart. Taryn understood. The Nayari leaders had feared the power. They had kept it away from everyone, even their own people, because in the wrong hands, it could do great harm. Suddenly, the lights inside the tower shifted. A low sound echoed through the walls. Leary turned quickly and ran to the side panel. She pressed a few buttons. A screen opened, showing space above the planet a ship was coming. Taryn looked at the shape on the screen. It was not a trade ship, not human military either. It was something old, heavy, covered in sharp lines and dark color. "A warship," Taryn said. Still active, Leary tapped the screen. She brought up the ship's ID. It was an old Nayari fleet ship, left behind after the war. It must have been hiding in deep space, still active, still following its last command. The ship sent a scan signal to the surface. It was looking for movement, for energy, for signs of threat. Taryn turned to Leary. "It saw us," he said. "It's coming for this tower." Leary opened a small console and began typing fast. The tower's defense system woke up. A shield surrounded the main device. The walls began to hum with power, but the old warship was already entering the atmosphere. Taryn grabbed his gear. "We can't fight a ship like that," he said. "Not with small tools. We need a plan." Leary stepped to the center and placed both hands on the device. Her fingers moved across the controls. She looked up at him and pointed to the cliffs outside. Then she pointed to herself. "You want me to leave?" Taryn asked. "While you stay here?" Leary nodded. Once, Taryn shook his head. "No. We stay. Together." The device spoke in a soft voice, in Nayari language. It said the system was active, but still locked. Only full access could control the energy. Leary looked at the chip again, then at Taryn. He stepped forward. "What if I help you?" "Unlock it," Leary seemed unsure. She placed her hand on the surface. Taran placed his hand beside hers. The light glowed brighter. The system read both of them, human and Nayari, soldier and thinker, opposites, together. The shield grew stronger. The power inside the device settled. The warship above sent another signal, but it could no longer scan the tower. They had hidden it for now. Taran looked at her. You said this was for the future, not war, not control, but peace. Leary finally opened her mouth. Her voice was quiet and soft. Peace, she said. Taran stared at her. It was the first word she had spoken since the day he chose her. It was the right word, outside. The warship circled once, then turned away. It could no longer see them. It moved, back into space. Slow and heavy, inside the tower, silence returned. Taran sat down on the floor. Leary sat beside him. No more secrets between them. They were not enemies, not anymore. They were keepers of something powerful, and they had just taken the first step on a new path. The tower stood still beneath the high cliffs. The wind moved through the valley, touching the grass and the stone. Inside, the device pulsed with soft blue light. It was quiet now, but its energy filled the room like a deep breath waiting to be released. Taran sat near the wall, checking his tools. His body was tired, but his mind was focused. Leary stood by the main console, watching the screen closely. She had spoken only one word since they arrived, but that word still echoed in Taran's mind. Peace. She was not just a thinker. She was a believer. She had hidden this device not to protect herself, but to protect its purpose. Now that they had activated it together, they had to protect it from others who would not understand. The calm did not last long. A low signal buzzed through the tower's walls. Leary turned to the monitor. Another ship had entered the system. This one was different, bigger than the first. Its shape was wide and sharp. Its energy signal was old, but powerful. Taran stepped beside her and looked at the screen. The ship had no clear markings. Its ID code was broken. But he knew what it was. A Shadow Fleet ship, he said. Leary nodded slowly. Her fingers moved across the controls, trying to stay hidden. The ship was searching. It was not loyal to the Nayari or the humans. These ships had been built during the early war and left behind. Some of them had no pilots, just war programs. Machines that only followed one command: destroy all threats. The shadow ship moved into orbit. It sent out long scan waves. Taran and Leary activated the tower's shield again. The tower went dark from outside. No signal escaped. But they both knew it was not enough. Taran walked to the side panel and opened a small door. Inside were old defensive tools. Nothing strong, a pulse rifle, a shield pack, a signal jammer. He handed Leary a small device that blocked heat signatures. She placed it around her neck. If it comes down here, Taran said, we won't have much time. Leary looked at him and tapped the console. She pointed to a hidden passage that led out of the back of the tower into a deep cave system under the mountain. You want to run? Taran asked. She shook her head. Then she pointed at the device. It had to stay protected. The shadow ship sent another scan. This one was stronger. A light flashed across the sky. It had found the tower's shape. A moment later, a sound like thunder broke across the valley. A beam of red energy fired down, hitting the cliff near the tower. The ground shook. Rocks fell. Trees burned. The tower held strong, but another hit would break the shield. Taran moved fast. He adjusted the signal jammer and pointed it at the sky. The device sent a wave of static across the ship's scanner. It bought them time. Get to the device, Taran said. We need to lock it. Leary ran to the control ring. Her hands flew over the keys. The blue light around the device grew bright, then faded to a soft pulse. It entered sleep mode, hidden again. Protected from any system, another beam hit the valley, but it missed the tower. It struck the side hill and sent fire into the air. The shadow ship was closing in. Taran grabbed the pulse rifle and stood at the front door. He opened it slightly and looked out. A small craft had broken away from the main ship. It was dropping into the valley. A scout unit, probably unmanned, meant to enter, scan, and destroy. He turned to Leary. "Get to the cave. I'll lead it away." She shook her head and picked up the signal jammer. She pointed at the cliffs above. There was a path that led to the upper ridge. If they reached it, they could send a false signal and confuse the ship. Taran nodded. They moved quickly through the side exit, climbing the rocky path that twisted up the mountain. The small scout craft landed behind them, its lights scanning the area. Metal legs stepped across the grass. It moved like a spider, searching with sharp sensors. Taran stopped near a rock ledge and aimed his rifle. He fired once, not to destroy, but to get the machine's attention. It turned toward him at once and followed. Leary kept climbing, reaching the upper ridge. She placed the jammer on a flat stone and activated a signal loop. It sent a strong energy signature in the wrong direction. The scout picked up the false signal and changed path. It followed the loop away from the tower. Taran joined her at the ridge. "Good work," he said. She pointed down to the tower. The shadow ship was moving again. It had not fired another beam. Maybe it had lost interest. Maybe it believed the place was empty, or maybe it was waiting. They stayed on the ridge until the ship moved out of orbit. It drifted away slowly, turning its scanners to another part of the system. After a few hours, it vanished into the dark. They returned to the tower before nightfall. The area was quiet again. The damage around the cliffs was deep, but the tower had held inside. The device remained hidden in sleep mode. Safe for now, Taran sat on the floor and looked at Leary. "That won't be the last one," he said. "Others will come." She nodded. Then she took the pad and drew a symbol. 2 circles, joined by a bridge. Then she wrote one word below it. "Together." Taran smiled. "Yes," he said. "We protect it together." They spent the night repairing what they could. They added extra shield layers, hid the ship under thick cover, and placed new sensors around. The valley, as the stars rose high, they sat near the tower's wall. The sky was full of light. Far above, other ships moved in silence. Some were friendly, some were not. But for now, peace remained, and they were ready to defend it. The days passed quietly in the valley. The sky remained clear. The birds returned to the trees. The grass began to grow again where fire had touched the ground. The air smelled of earth and rain inside the tower. The device slept peacefully. Its light pulsed low, like a calm heartbeat. Taran and Leary checked the systems each morning. They cleaned the panels, repaired the shields, and walked the edges of the valley to make sure nothing had changed. No new ships appeared. No strange signals came through, but they stayed alert. Taran had lived through enough war to know peace was something that must be guarded, not assumed. One evening, Leary sat near the edge of the cliff, looking down at the valley. The wind moved gently through her hair. Taran walked over and sat beside her. Neither spoke. They just watched the sun sink slowly behind the hills. Leary held the small chip in her hand, the one that had unlocked the device. She turned it over and over, as if remembering everything it had shown. Her eyes were calm, but thoughtful. Taran looked at her. "You're thinking about what comes next," he said. She nodded once, then pointed to the sky. Then to the device inside the tower, then back to herself. "You want to share it?" he said. "But carefully." She picked up the data pad and began drawing. This time it was not a design or a system. She drew people, human and Nayari, standing in a circle around the device. No weapons, no guards, just listening. Taran understood. The device was not meant to be hidden forever. It was meant to be used with wisdom, to help both sides, to build what the war had broken. But who do we trust? He asked. Leary tapped the pad and wrote 2 names. One was a human scientist. The other, a Nayari elder. Both had once spoken against the war. Both had vanished from the public eye before. The final battles. They're alive? Taryn asked. Leary nodded. She opened another file, a small data trail, a message sent long ago, a meeting place, a name. It was a remote moon far from any main path, a neutral place. If they could reach it, they could speak to those who still believed in peace. Taryn stood up and paced slowly. He looked at the ship, still hidden beneath thick cover. He looked at the stars. It won't be safe, he said. If we take the chip with us, someone might track it. If we leave it here, the tower must stay protected. Leary tapped the pad again. She had a plan. One of them would go. One would stay. If anything went wrong, the one who remained would protect the valley. Taryn looked at her. You want to go alone? She nodded again. She pointed at herself, then at the pad. She was the only one who knew how to explain the device properly. The only one the Nayari elder might trust. Her face, her history, her silence. It all mattered. Taryn understood. But he didn't like it. He had taken her from the battlefield not to own her, but to protect her. Still, he knew she was no longer someone who needed saving. She had chosen her path. I'll stay, he said at last. I'll keep the tower safe. Leary placed a hand on his shoulder. A soft look passed between them. They didn't need more words. That night, they prepared the ship. They loaded supplies, navigation data, and a sealed copy of the device's core blueprint. The real one would stay hidden in the valley. Only if peace was truly possible would they share it fully at dawn. Leary stood near the ship, ready to leave. Taryn handed her a small wrist beacon. It sent only one signal, a call for help. Just in case, she nodded, then stepped into the ship. The door closed. The engine hummed. A few moments later, it rose quietly into the sky and vanished among the stars. Taryn stood alone at the cliff edge, watching the sky long after the ship had gone. Days passed. The tower remained quiet. Taryn followed the same routine, checking systems, watching the sky, repairing the sensor lines, waiting. Then one evening, just before the sun fell, the beacon blinked once. It was Leary's signal. Taryn opened the console. A message appeared. Simple, calm, clear. They listened. They understood. They are ready below. The message was a time and a location. A meeting had been agreed. Representatives from both sides would come. Not in war, not in fear, but in hope. Taryn sent back his response. One word. Ready the following day, he began preparing the valley. He cleared space near the tower. He marked safe paths. He reactivated the old translator nodes. He placed calm lights along the cliffs so ships could land without fear. When Leary returned, she was not alone. With her came 2 quiet ships, one human, one Nayari. From each, a small group stepped out. No weapons, only eyes full of caution and curiosity. They entered the valley slowly. Taryn and Leary greeted them at the tower door. No guards stood between them. No fences. Only trust inside the tower. The device waited. The visitors saw it with wide eyes. Some took notes. Some asked questions. Others simply listened. Leary showed them the designs, the power to heal planets, the danger of misuse, the cost of war, the value of trust. They listened. And when the time came to decide, no one spoke in anger. No one shouted. They agreed on one thing: it must be protected by both sides, used only when all agreed. A shared promise. That night, Taryn stood once more at the edge of the cliff. Leary joined him, silent as always. The stars above were the same, but the world below had changed. She looked at him and placed the chip into his hand once again. This time not as a secret, but as a gift to be shared. Taran closed his fingers around it. "Let's build something better," he said. And beside him, the one who had once been the weakest now stood as the strongest voice for peace. Together, they had chosen not to end the war with more war, but to begin again.